pretty much right away. It's at the end of this meeting.
It's now 4:30. I'm going to call the August 22nd, 2017 meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Could I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second, Mr. Ogala?
Yes, I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would one of you like to give me a motion?
What's your name in the minutes?
Either one of you?
I'll move to approve the consent
Mr.
agenda.
Anderson?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any customers to be heard? Seeing none, here's where we get to the bad part of the meeting. Are there any recognitions? Madam Mayor, would you please identify yourself to everybody at home?
I am a customer to be heard. My name is Delray Williams. I live at
Do I have an
1011
option in
10th
this?
Street South. No, you don't.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and I know it's hard. People don't say no to me very easily, and so I appreciate.
You
this.
obviously haven't been to many council meetings. Never mind, go ahead.
I know you don't want any recognition, and I think they are obliging you with that. But, you know, I want to speak on behalf of the citizens of Moorhead, and thank you for your many years and for all your time and your passion that you've put into this. It's very heartfelt, Ken, and I know you're fishing today, and I hope you have tons of that and enjoy all those kinds of things that I can't imagine all the time. You're going to have this span of time left that you're going to have to
I'm
figure
not
out how
ready
to
to retire,
fill.
Delray, but that's fine. Go ahead.
I know, and I know you're not retiring, but I want to recognize that you do put a lot of time into this, and we're really appreciative of that and that effort and the passion you put into it. The citizens of Moorhead owe you a debt in that, and so I just want to thank you. I also, I know this is probably a silly thing, but they at one time had done had these pins that I claimed, and I started calling them my awesome pins. So whenever somebody does something awesome, I like recognizing them by giving them a pin. It's a Moorhead pin, and so I'll do that, and I'll sign off. And
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delray. Thank you for the very kind comments. Thank you very much. Are there any other parties who want to be heard?
Go ahead, Dave. You go.
I only wish the camera had been trained on him for some of those remarks, because the expressions were priceless. I'm going to take just a moment to thank you for allowing me to sit here at your left side for these 5 years, because I have had a great learning experience sitting alongside this gentleman. And I came into this effort as a new commissioner. I hope with an open mind, but really with not a heck of a lot of knowledge and experience of the industry, and I've learned a great deal alongside of you. And so I'll keep it short and sweet. Ken, thank you very much for the experience. It's been a pleasure to be working here alongside of you.
Thank you, Dave.
You bet.
Mr. Rogala.
Well, since Dave spoke for the left, I better speak for the right.
I would expect no less.
So,
I truly would expect no less.
I believe it's 29 plus years of service to Moorhead Public Service. So that's an accomplishment to
Nobody thought I'd live that long.
I'm surprised you have in some cases. But 29 years of dedicated service. And speaking of his service not only to the commissioners, which he certainly helped me learn how to work with the charter, which he's an advocate of, the users, as well as staff. Ken has really committed himself to those three areas, and hopefully we'll continue that with the years to come for Moorhead Public Service. So thank you, Ken.
For those of you at home who are not aware, this will be my last meeting as chairman and a member of the Moorhead Public Service Commission. 29 years has gone by in the blink of an eye, and I would be remiss if I didn't make a few comments before we go on to the rest of this meeting. When I came on board, I was somewhat mentored by a gentleman sitting out in the middle of our audience in the form of Tom Heller, who was our general manager, who did a fabulous job. Then he went on to Missouri River to do as good a job there. And the one thing I found out in lo these many years is that without the people of Moorhead Public Service, the workers, the line workers, the water workers, the management staff, the people in the office, those of us sitting up here would not have the easy job that we do have. And I look at Nancy out there, a finer, more dedicated employee with regard to watching over our beans we could never find anywhere. And Bill, a great general manager, although we've had our talks and disagreements, and that will continue, but now I can be out there and do it.
Looking forward to it.
All I can say is that it's a wonderful place to be associated with. And at the same time, the people of Moorhead should be so proud of having this entity serve them. You go across the river, you go to Xcel Energy's territory, you go to the co-op's territory. They don't have the same level of dedication and service that we see every day of the week from the people of Moorhead Public Service. And that makes our job up here so easy. Sure, we have our challenges and we have the things we have to look out for, but aside from that, our staff is incredible. And for those people in the city of Moorhead who've not had the opportunity to work with that staff, let me tell you something, go someplace else and try to find a better staff, and you won't have that happen. So thank you to everybody sitting out here who's a member of Moorhead Public Service. Now, are we done with my recognition?
I was going to read one thing because I drafted a press release, but of course when I talked to Ken, he said there's going to be no press release that's sent out. So I just wanted to read a little bit of that, and that is just like Ken, because he didn't want the recognition. He didn't want to open house. He didn't want to go out that way. But here's just my draft. Ken Norman has, and it's got some stuff about an open house and that type of thing. I'm skipping that, but Ken Norman has guided MPS through a number of challenging times, including the 1997, 2009, 2010, 2011 Red River floods. In addition, Mr. Norman was part of MPS's foray into renewable energy technologies, where MPS became the first utility in Minnesota to install the Community Wind Renewable Energy Program and Community Solar Program, which, by the way, was recognized this morning again by American Public Power Association. In the mid-90s, MPS completed construction on a state-of-the-art ozone water treatment facility, again, first one in the state. Under Mr. Norman's watch, MPS has constructed numerous new and upgraded electrical and water substations, pumping stations, and transmission lines, improving the reliability of MPS's electric and water systems. And we all know that Ken is the 5 nines guy. It's really tough to get to 5 nines, but he's always strived for that.
It's Joe's fault.
Ken has always been a proponent of an aggressive replacement of aging facility, aggressive program of replacing aging facilities, and supported the MPS water main replacement program. Ken will be remembered for his strong commitment to MPS employees, serving many years on various committees to provide competitive compensation, benefits, and policies to attract and retain MPS's most valuable resource, its employees. Thank you, Ken. And I do thank you, Ken.
Thank you for the comments. As you said, I didn't necessarily want any kind of recognition. That's not why I'm here. And to a message to the young people of our community, when I first got out of law school and went to work for a local bank in Fargo, I was told by the person I worked for, the president of the bank, that I have to do something in my community or it wasn't necessary for me to work in that bank. And I've never forgotten those words, and I feel strongly that all of us owe our community something, especially if we are able to live a good life and have all of the things that a good community can provide to you. So it's sort of a challenge that Al Simpson laid on me many years ago. I won't tell you about the conversation I had with him 25 years after that fact, but it's a good lesson to learn, and it's been fun. It truly has, and I thank all of you. And with that, we're going to go on with our meeting. Okay. Any other customers are to be heard or recognitions? Okay. Any old business, Bill?
No. Sir.
Oh, yeah. Now he says, sir. 29 years, now he says, sir. Whatever. Okay. Members of the City Council. Heidi, what have you got to report?
Well, I did have a long speech prepared to recognize you and all that you've done. I'll wait. I'll maybe send that to you in an email or something, since you don't want that. But no, thank you for all your service, and I'll keep you on speed dial. Other than that, I do have an issue that came up. A young couple just around the corner from me alerted me to an issue they were having with their water meter. Their reading had jumped quite high from the previous month, and they were concerned about that, and concerned that their meter may be off, or maybe broken or whatnot. So she had called MPS and was, I guess, taken aback by how she was treated. Was concerned that she was told some information that she wasn't sure was fair. I wasn't sure it was fair. She wanted somebody to come out and inspect the meter, and was told that she would have to pay for that. She would have to maybe find a private company to do that for her. And she just wanted to get to the bottom of what was causing the jump in water increase, because nothing had changed in their usage from the previous month. No sprinkler system, pool, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought maybe we could just have a conversation about what do people do when they notice a spike like that is inexplicable. Is it common? Do meters fail? What happens when meters fail? And what should a homeowner look for if they do notice their usage has increased and they can't explain it? And then lastly, can we relook the policy of not sending people out? Maybe there's a line at, if it's a minor usage jump, maybe we don't send people out, but if it's a double your usage and you can't figure out why.
May I anecdotally at least answer one of those questions?
You can answer them all if you'd like.
Okay, well, I'll try as best I can. I've always been told by our well-trained and efficient staff that I just talked about a moment ago that if the water meters go bad, they normally go bad in favor of the customer, not more at public service. So normally they slow down and you don't get billed for more, you get billed for less. I had a call, I'm going to say about a month ago, from a very good customer who complained about the fact that his water usage just skyrocketed. And he couldn't explain why this had happened. He said, well, I know you well, so I don't assume that you're taking any more showers than you used to. And he acknowledged that was the case. And we had a number of conversations. I know he spoke with a number of people on our staff, and he was still raising particular cane. And I said to him, well, first of all, I'm going to say, go check your toilet and make sure that the flapper valve is not leaking, because that's a very common occurrence. It's something that causes all sorts of problems and a lot of water usage, and you don't even know that it's happening. No, it can't be that. I worked in a hardware store. I know all about plumbing. This isn't a problem. Okay. So he called me a couple more times, and he was saying that he was working with staff. And lo and behold, he called me last week and said, I've got to apologize. And he says, why is that? Well, we had turned off one of those toilets because we were trying to find out what was going on. We turned it back on, and the flapper valve was leaking. And so he found out what his problem was. So sometimes it's internal in the appliances, the plumbing appliances we have inside the home that cause those problems. Now, the customer service issue, however, is something that seems really outside of the way in which we treat those kind of things. Normally, we say, if there's a problem, we'll go out and check it for you. Has that changed? Because when you talk about changing a policy, I don't know if that's a policy that this board has ever adopted. Of course, I've been wrong on policies before.
Well, there's a couple of policies you're probably referring to, and at one of the upcoming planning sessions, we're going to be talking about our customer service policies and practices, and this will be part of that. And I think it'll be good for an education of how a utility does things, and then look at whether we should operate a bit differently, especially for some of these customers that either this is the first time and we'll probably not hear from them again because they'll figure out, like in your case, that it was their issue or whatever. But, how do we work better with them so that we can, make sure and address the problem, educate them, whatever. It does seem like we have about a dozen people a week, or a month, excuse me, that have the same issue that you described, where we have to kind of talk them through trying to figure out where the issue is, because the meter tends to read very accurately. So if it's high, it probably did have water go through that meter. And if it went through the meter, then we're very consistent that you have to pay for that. And we have to gently get them to that point, because it can be very expensive, because you're paying water charges, you're paying wastewater charges, and in the summertime, you're even paying excess charges, a conservation rate for the water, and excess charges for, you still pay for some of the wastewater charges on the excess water use. So, I mean, there's a conversation that happens between us and the customers, and we try and treat everybody the same, be consistent. Their definition of fair may not be our definition of fair, especially if the toilet flapper stuck up and they owe $500 in a month, per se. But that's what happened in this case. That's happened to my next door neighbor. That's happened to a number of people. And it is painful. And in the summertime especially, because our rates are higher in the summertime.
I know, I irrigate.
Yeah.
At the same time, however, I'm going to go back to a couple of very modest principles that we should keep in mind. A J.C. Penney founded his store on a very simple principle. As a matter of fact, it was called the Golden Rule Store for many years, and that is, do unto others you'd have them do unto you. So from a customer service standpoint, the customer's always right. And we should look at that customer and say, what can we do to make your problem go away, and how can we fix it for you? That's number one. Number two, if she was rudely treated, which I think that you sort of implied in your comments, or she thought she was rudely treated.
She never used the word rude.
Okay?
But I sensed that she was upset.
Okay? So whatever way she was treated, it did not make her happy,
Correct.
which is going to happen with some customers anyway, and some of them you're not going to please. At the same time, however, I think that we have to, and we've talked about this before, we have to get to the point where we are working for our customers and not the other way around. David, I see you turned your button on.
Yeah, I just wanted to join in. The golden rule, we've known of that for a long time, and even when the customer isn't right, they're right. And we need to work with them, with that in mind. I was just going to point out the math a little bit. If we get a dozen or so of these calls a month, that means every 2.5 days or so we get a call. So I'm hopeful that what we're doing is we're treating each and every one of them as an individual call and a unique call, and that we're not just lumping them all into the same basket. Because, as you said, most of the time the meter is going to be right on, and every once in a while we're going to get a surprise and the meter isn't working, or something, But to be a responsive coach in this situation, we've all been there. As a customer, I've recently had a situation too where, son of a gun, you know what? It went the other way. It wasn't my problem. I didn't even realize I had a problem for a while.
Dave, you've had a problem for a while.
Yeah, well, yeah, I have various problems, but the problem that I had with MPS was looked into, Heck, I didn't even ask for it. I pointed something out that was a surprise to me, and before I knew it, somebody was out at my house to check equipment that wasn't inside the house. You know, it was exterior, but we were very responsive, and I'd sure like to think that wasn't just because I sit up at this desk every couple of weeks.
Matter of fact, all of our customers should be treated better than us.
Yeah. So I would just remind all of us that each and every one of these are individual cases. We need to spend whatever it is, time and care and effort in dealing with it. And let's find out what the problem is. I think all reasonable people are going to be willing to then say, oh my gosh, you know, I probably should have had my plumbing checked, or, you know, I've got a leaky faucet on the outside, we don't even see it drip, you know. But you know what? If a faucet's dripping and your hose is leaking and it's turned on all the time, like I do too often, and I don't turn that faucet off, there can be a lot of water loss there, and I have to pay for every drop of it. I'd like to see that we get in touch with this customer soon, and that we maybe start over, listen, find out what's going on, and then respond accordingly. You know, we might learn something. Might be something new. So,
Bill, just maybe to expand on what we heard earlier as far as, so we do not send out people or get more clarification as far as what options the homeowner should look at. Basically, what the summary here of that conversation was. So maybe if you would want to just share a little bit with us right now as far as if I were to call and had the same questions, what would be what would you expect of the normal discussion, and then how that would then be resolved. So I don't know.
Bring either Nancy or Chris up to go over that procedure, just to make sure we get it right.
Nancy Lund, Admin and Finance Manager. So this time of year, we're fielding probably hundreds of those types of calls on water usage, as people have been, up until it got, until the precipitation increased, we'd been having a lot of phone calls. And so probably a couple hundred a week maybe of customers calling in and questioning their usage. Usually our customer account specialist will go through their history, they'll pull it up, they'll take a look at it. You know, we'll talk about things like irrigation, we'll talk about plumbing issues within the house that they may want to look at, toilets that seem to be running. We give them ideas of doing what we call the dye test in their toilets to see if it's a silent leak and things like that. So we do go through quite an extensive list normally of things that they could look at to try to identify where this water might have been. This is usually 2 to 3 weeks after the event has happened too, so sometimes, you know, the recent history is not recallable by the individuals or anything too. Normally it ends up being some kind of, it's either outside irrigation or an internal plumbing problem, a faucet, a toilet, or something like that. So we go through that process. Then we do try to dissuade the customers from having us come out and test the meters. You know, in the days prior to meter automation, it could have been a meter reading error. Well, today we've got 95 or 98% automated meter reading in place, so the meter reading errors have been eliminated. So we're down to the probability is very high that the water did go through the meter and was used somewhere in the house. So it becomes an education process and trying to give that customer some options. And we do try to dissuade the meter testing process because it's costly. It's going to cost us about $100 to go out, pull the meter, bring it back to a shop, test it, and install it again. Past history says 99% of the time the meter is going to be accurate. So we would be going through that process with the same outcome as we expect from the start of the process. So we're back to education, you know, trying to get that customer to think about what they might have been doing differently, you know, different people in the house, increased company, and look at all those options. Ultimately, it comes down to usually some outside irrigation, gardens, lawns, things like that, or a plumbing problem that they weren't aware of. Our customer service people also do proactive reach outs to customers on increased water usage. It's a little harder to do that during the summer when it's irrigation, but definitely in the non-irrigating season, they will make a proactive call out to the customer saying, hey, it looks like you may have a problem. So we've got some parameters set, so if consumption goes up, I think it's 50% above normal, we would call that customer and say, hey, we think you've got a problem, check some things out, give them some ideas. And so we do that proactively, but again, in the majority of the cases, that meter is correct. And it becomes an education process or help that customer troubleshoot and try to figure out what their plumbing problem may be.
Thank you, Ken. Is there ever, or is it possible to do follow-up calls and find out if they've resolved the issue or if they're satisfied with the resolution? I know that would take time, but it might, in some instances, where a client is very persistent, it might warrant a follow-up call to find out if they figured out the issue or if they're still struggling with it.
We haven't looked at adding that protocol. We do have a number of customers who do call back in and say, thank you, I found the problem. So we will get some of those, but we don't have that system set up to call and check on people. The customer you're talking about, I believe I have a note on my desk that came late this afternoon to reach out to her again to try to, help her understand, what may have been going on or something. Again, trying to educate as to what might have been going on there, because I think she has talked with 3 or 4 different individuals, and so we're still trying to gently educate her on maybe trying to identify something within the house that might be causing the problem.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy.
Okay. David?
Nancy, kind of a sensitive issue, but what do we do to support our customer service specialists in this busy season so that, maybe as they get, the avalanche of calls and there's some fatigue that sets in, or just I'm tired, I'm worn out, I'm getting a little irritated and so forth. What do we do to back our folks so that they don't get into those situations where, oh golly, it's just another customer with the same complaint and so forth? I'm hopeful that we're aware of those situations and that we're providing support for our people.
We do try to remind those people that, just because you dealt with it 5 times this week doesn't mean that it's not, it is new to the next customer that calls in. So we do try to remind them of that and to keep that fresh attitude. And we've been looking at some information. We'll talk about this in about a month when we do our customer service strategic planning. We'll be looking at the volume of calls and activity that customer service staff is handling right now, and compared to the growth that's gone on in Moorhead. So we will look at some of those numbers. I've been doing some surveys with some of the larger municipal utilities in Minnesota to see what those trends are and looking at that. And the hardest one is probably trying to remind our customer service people that, a lot of times the people they deal with are collection issues. It's it's a small percentage of the people, but for the normal customers we don't hear from, the normal customers that we serve and serve well, we don't hear from those. Our customer service people deal with the people who have some issues. And that does get to be sometimes a challenge for them.
Follow-up question, Nancy. So all our customer service staff would handle all those inquiries, and we don't have a dedicated staff person for specific issues as far as service complaints or collection calls or anything of that sort. Is that correct?
Correct. We have a staff of about 6 people. The customer account specialists that do the billing would handle the outbound high water calls or high electric calls. So those people handle those. Otherwise, everybody handles the incoming calls, whether it's calls for collections or calls for I'm moving from here to there, or I need service work or anything. They pretty much handle everything. Okay. So they do share those responsibilities. We've been doing that for many years, where the collection person does collections for 3 months and then they move to a different area so that their focus changes. And so that does give them a little bit of relief from the constant pressures of some of those higher pressure positions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other questions, comments?
Are you good with?
Do you feel comfortable with that?
I do, thank you. I appreciate that you'll be reaching out to her and some follow-up calls will be made. I'll also be chatting with her to let her know that I brought it up and that the conversation was had. I really hope that we can help this young couple figure out what the issue is. They just live right around the corner from me, and recently bought the house, and so maybe there is something internal that's going on that they had no idea about. So maybe it'll be a great educational opportunity. So I appreciate you, all the support that you're giving this couple.
Yep. Thank you. Members of the Public Service Commission, anything to report? Well, there's something I'm going to mention. I asked Bill to send out an article that appeared in the St. Paul Pioneer Press recently relative to action taken by the city of St. Paul on how they're going to handle the increased fees that they had down in St. Paul, and they passed those off now to be treated as taxable costs rather than treating those as fees. And we've had this discussion up here before, so I hope you read that. And of course, there was a Minnesota Supreme Court case recently that found against the city of St. Paul in the imposition of fees. So I just want to draw that to your attention. I think it's thank you. Mr. General Manager.
I have nothing to report.
Wonderful. We can go down to our strategic planning. I see that Mr. Heller is in the audience. Is he going to speak as a part of our strategic planning?
Yep.
Okay.
And should we move down here? Yep.
And I would be remiss if I don't indicate to the people of the north side of Moorhead that they will be, although I'm going to be gone from the Moorhead Public Service Commission, Cheryl Dyson has been appointed as my successor. I have the utmost faith that you've got a pretty good person coming in to take my place. And from my perspective, you've got a pretty good commission to join too. And you'll have a lot of fun up here. So with that, let's go down and start our strategic planning. And Cheryl, you're welcome to come down and join us. Pardon?
Do you want 10 cards down there?
No. But I don't ever get listened to anyway, so.
You can sit in.
Is your video and audio?
Do we have enough chairs? Is that what the problem is, Mark? Do we have enough chairs? Okay, you ready? Strategic planning, we're talking about electricity.
Yes, we are, and we have the opportunity to have Tom Heller, CEO of Missouri River Energy Services, here. And so what we basically did was we're bumping Travis and some of his discussion of more local electric utility issues to go regional with our supplemental power supplier. Missouri River Energy Services, of course, provides everything over and above what we get from Western Area Power Administration. Western Area Power Administration is the federal hydro dams along the Missouri River. 100% renewable, although it doesn't count. But then, and Tom can describe a little bit more about Missouri River Energy Services. The only other thing I'll say is that if you look at what we pay to Western Area Power Administration and Missouri River Energy Services, it's about 60% of our electric budget. So about 60% of our electric rate is those two power suppliers. So what Tom and his team does from their headquarters in Sioux Falls and all around the region makes a lot of difference to us. So anyway, I'll pass it over to Tom, and he can talk, and this is a planning session, so interrupt him with questions. He's going to talk a little bit about some of the strategic planning that MRAS has gone through, and he'd welcome your comments, questions.
Thank you, Bill. Oh, thanks.
Welcome, Mr. Heller.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Moorhead Public Service Commission and staff, I appreciate the opportunity to be here again. I was here about a year ago, I believe, and had a presentation to make to the chairman of the commission at that time. And what I'd like to do is just take a couple of minutes late this afternoon and talk about a couple of things that we're working on. As Bill said, I'll talk a little bit about who Missouri River Energy Services is and your connection with us and how important you are to us. And then secondly, a couple of the strategic planning initiatives that we're going through. And I've got a couple of pictures and a video at the end of one of our big projects we're working on right now, the Red Rock Hydro Project in close to Des Moines and next to Pella, Iowa. And with that, I think most of you do know, but Missouri River Energy Services, we're just a little over 50 years old. We're a municipal joint action agency. Our headquarters are in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We have 60 members. Moorhead is the largest member of those. And all of our members have municipally owned distribution systems. And as Bill indicated, you have a hydropower allocation, and we were formed because the members, such as yourselves, that had hydropower allocations back in the 1960s and 70s, the federal government came to you and said, we can't supply all your needs anymore. You're going to have to find someplace else to get your future power growth needs. And we were formed. We were formed back in 1965. Back in 1977, your hydropower allocation was capped because WAPA, back at the time, the Bureau of Reclamation, couldn't supply any more of your needs. You had to have someone else supply all your growth energy, and that's where we started. Back in 1976, 1977, thereabouts, we started selling power to you and our other members. And I think currently today we provide a little less than half, Bill, is that about right, of your power supply? About 50-50. About half of your power supply comes from us, and about half comes from the Western Area Power Administration hydropower. And all of your growth needs will be provided by us as well, other than a little carve-out that we've allowed you to undertake here in Moorhead that I think you should be quite proud of, and that's your renewable energy projects, your solar and your wind projects that you have. Our organization, as I said, is 60 municipal utilities. Half of them, or about half of them, are in Minnesota, western Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and Iowa. We have 13 members on our board of directors. They're elected by our membership. We are a governmental entity. We are what's called an Iowa 2080, which is an intergovernmental agency that's created under the laws of Iowa, but exists under the laws of all the states. We're really a joint powers agreement between cities in 4 different states. And Bill sits on the board of directors. Actually, he is chairman of our finance committee. We do appreciate the time that he takes and the other board members take once a month to come to Sioux Falls and meet with us and provide us direction as you provide your staff direction.
Tom, what's the mix of your board between paid professionals such as Bill, the manager, and appointed or elected?
They're almost all, I'm trying to think, they're all utility staff people. Okay. Now, a couple of them are retired that have stayed on with the city and still are city representatives, such as our chairman, Harold Skiba from Sioux Center, Iowa. Harold was the city manager at Sioux Center for quite a few years and is retired, but still works part-time for the city of Sioux Center. So they're people that are in the profession. The power supply that we have, a couple of the ones that you're probably aware of, the largest facility we have is Laramie River Station. We're in a partnership with Basin Electric Power Cooperative and some other organizations and a plant in Wheatland, Wyoming. It's about 1,610 megawatts, a large facility. We own about 280 megawatts. There's three big power plants there, and I know a couple of you have actually came out and toured the plant with us when we've had tours before. That power plant supplies about a third of the energy that we provide to you right now. So it's only about a third. We've got some it's about a third of the total energy, I should say, that you have in your portfolio. We have some other resources as well that we have. We have some gas turbines that burn natural gas in Iowa. We have quite a few renewable resources. We've got about 100 megawatts of wind turbines that we either own or we have purchased power agreements from. One Rugby, North Dakota, we're an owner of get the outtake of some of the energy from a facility there, as well as a couple in Minnesota as well. And we do have one small solar project that we have in Pierre, South Dakota. It's right at the airport in Pierre, 1 megawatt. And we're planning on future resources as well, but I'll talk about those in a few minutes. That's a little bit about who we are, what we do. We provide tax-exempt financing to finance those facilities. And because of that, we need to have long-term contracts. Long-term contracts that the bankers look at and say, okay, if you're going to build something that's going to cost, as in the case that you'll see in a few minutes, Red Rock Hydro Facility, $350 million, how are you going to pay for that? How do we know that you're guaranteed that we're going to have a revenue stream? And that's where our contracts come in. We have a contract with you called an S1, which is supplemental. It's power supply over and above your hydropower allocation, which you are obligated to purchase from us all your growth needs over and above that hydropower allocation through the year 2056. That sounds like a long time, but when you sell bonds that are 30 years to pay off, we need to have those long-term contracts to make sure that the bankers are willing to give us the money to finance these facilities. So that's kind of a little bit of the structure. Any questions on, Missouri River Energy Services? Where, we provide a lot of services as well that I can talk about in a few minutes, other than just the power supply side. We own some transmission facilities, but the distribution side of it is basically for our members. We're a joint action agency. The whole theory or the purpose of it is cities join together so that they get the economies of scale to build power plants, build transmission lines, and do it at a much lower cost. That's kind of the theory behind us. Annually, we undertake some strategic planning, and this past year, and Bill was involved in that as well, we've kind of come up with about 4 or 5 basic themes in the next 10 years that we need to look at so that we can continue to be successful and most importantly, continue to have you, our members, be successful. And one of the things a theme that came out that our board asked us to put in our strategic plan is communicating the value of public power. Ken, you mentioned, compared across the river, that Moorhead Public Service is a gem. You have a value to this community that is so great because you have your own electric utility. And we want to help provide information to Moorhead Public Service and to you on what that value really is. And one of the things that we're doing is we're providing a leadership academy in Sioux Falls on September 20th and 21st, and I can send some brochures around. Hopefully, I think, Bill, you said a couple of people were signed up for that? 3. Okay, great. There's a couple more. It's basically kind of a seminar that talks about Missouri River, who we are, our power supply, how we're connected to your community. We talk a little bit about Western Area Power Administration, your hydropower resource, renewable energy, how renewable energy is going to impact us in the future. Solar could be installed in a lot of our communities. We talk about cybersecurity, rates, cost of service, how do you set your rates, and some energy services, and a couple of other things. And we close it out by talking about governance. Tim Blodgett from Hometown Connections, which is associated with American Public Power Association, will give a little session on governance. So we'd like to invite you to please come to that. Hopefully you'll, I know Bill said you have several people that are coming, and that's great. But in that whole theme of communicating value of public power, we want to take and look at what we can do, such as sessions like this, to help educate new staff members, new utility commissioners, new city council people on what the value of public power is. And one of the things that we've just also started doing is, if you look at the City of Barnesville's website, we have started providing studies. In addition to the rate studies we do, it's called the Municipal Power Advantage Program Study. And we go a little bit further than just doing a rate study. And in our rate studies that we do, we'll do comparisons to other utilities. We actually look, well, what if the utility didn't exist? What if Moorhead Public Service wasn't here and you had the Rural Electric Co-op or XL Energy was here? what are the costs that the city and the consumers and your retail customers would see? And we've come up with an actual value per retail customer for the citizens of Barnesville on how much that would cost.
Have you done a similar comparison before?
No, we have not. It's a very detailed study, and if you'd like us to do that, we can put you in the queue and continue to do that, and continue on looking at that. But in your case, I'm sure we're going to get all the information. Some of our smaller members, sometimes it's difficult to get all the information, but I know, having worked with some of your staff here, it would be easy to get.
He hired some of the staff.
Tom, what was the name of that study?
Municipal Power Advantage. If you go to the City of Barnesville's website, there'll be a link there to the Municipal Power Advantage study.
You know, a few years ago, maybe longer than that, when Springstead came here, we were talking about the transfer-related issues. I don't know if you were on the council then or not. They also talked about, well, what if the transfer wasn't built in the city, what would the tax consequences be for the average homeowner or whatever? And of course, nobody sitting here was in any way, shape, manner, or form advocating termination of the transfer. We're talking about how to manage it going in the future. And it would seem to me that the study you're talking about, nobody listens to me anyway. It would seem, I'm not going to be here long enough. It would seem to me that the study you're talking about would coincide with a lot of that information. And I don't know if you could piggyback on the information that was previously done by Springstead, but I think that would be invaluable both to this commission and probably to the city council in terms of what is it that we bring to the table. And and you talk about the sessions that you're going to be having through MRES. From an economic development standpoint, I think it's vital that our municipalities understand the blessing that they have in the form of a municipal utility. I think that oftentimes gets overlooked.
No, in fact, that is one of the main things we look at when we look at a municipal power advantage study in a community is what are the things that the city jointly does with the utility. A lot of times they share employees, you do services together. Well, if you weren't there, the city'd have to pay for all that themselves. If you weren't there, the city transfer isn't there anymore. You may get a small contribution from an investor-owned utility, but it's usually pretty small in property tax compared to what you pay. So that's part of the study.
When we recently had a conversation with a utility whose name shall not be mentioned here to the west, they did indicate that they had a 5% franchise fee that they paid to the city of Fargo, and that's it. And of course their taxes go, if they are paying taxes, go to Never Never Land. And so from that standpoint, it is something that's worthwhile to discuss and get some good numbers on. I think even going forward and managing that transfer for the betterment of the community is a good idea.
Well, we can get some information off of Barnesville's website, and Bill can bring it to you, and if it's something that you'd like us to look at doing here, we can surely look at that. In addition to looking at the, communicating the value of public power, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that APPA, our national association, this is one of their prime directives in their strategic plan as well. The surveys that they've done is in communities like Moorhead, only 1 out of 5 consumers really knows that your utility is community-owned and provides all the benefits that it provides to the city. And we want to raise that level so that people understand what a gem you really have. One of the other things that we're looking at in our strategic planning, when you mentioned, Bill started talking about, when he was recognizing you, Ken, talking about your support of getting rid of aging facilities. I thought he was going to talk about
He wasn't
aging.
talking about me at the time.
No, but I resemble that fact. That's why
That was my thought, but I wasn't going to go there,
I resemble that fact, as well as many of the people that work with me at Missouri River Energy Services. And one of the #1 things, in fact, it's on the top of our strategic planning list, is to look at retaining and attracting people in the future. What are we going to do? We've got, in 5 to 10 years, 1/3 of our employees are going to retire. And it's not something you haven't seen yourselves, or the utilities aren't seeing. But as we leave, what are we doing to help train the people that are there now to replace us? I'm taking a personal commitment on helping develop and working on an employee development plan where we work with our employees to do some leadership training for them, to identify what things that they need so that they are in a position when these aging infrastructure people start retiring in the next few years.
The Carl Mykoffs of the world come
Yes.
knocking on.
So that's another one of the important strategic plans that we have. And we may also, and I think this is going to be at the direction of the board is talking about, we'll be talking about this as well, is what should we do in helping our members, local utilities, develop their staff and do some leadership training. I mean, this is a start, but there's going to be more things that we could potentially do as well to help train the Generation X and Yers and the millennials to take over when us aging infrastructure people have to retire. So that's kind of the third one. Communicating the value of public power was first, retaining and attracting people. Second, thirdly, what are we doing in this new age in electric utilities of no growth? There was years and years that we would have growth every year. I mean, every year you'd plan on more growth and you'd have more kilowatt hours to sell, and of your fixed costs, your costs would go down because you had more kilowatt hours to sell it over. That's not happening anymore. It's not that it's bad. In fact, it is good. We do still have some growth. When we look at our projections for next year at Missouri River and all the members we have, we've got a lot of big spot loads coming in. A lot of commercial industrial customers are going to be built in our member communities, which is great. But on the other side of that, I think we're doing a good job working with your people in Moorhead and our other communities on energy conservation. We're working with your retail customers, mostly your larger customers, on helping them do lighting retrofits, giving them rebate checks so that they use less energy. They don't need as much energy as they have before. That saves them money. That provides them to be in a better economic position so they can spend that money on other things in your community. Many think that that's not very smart to do, but I think it's something that we're obligated, and we need to do that and continue to do that for your retail customers, and work with Bill and work with all of your staff to continue to do that. That's just a fact. We're going to have less and less growth sales in the future. So how do we set our rates? And we're working with Bill and our other member communities to make sure that your rates and our rates are set correctly, so that if you have a lot of retail customers, residential customers that decide they want to put solar panels on the roofs of their houses, how do you make sure that the other customers aren't subsidizing them? We're going to be working with our members to make sure that we're available to help them review their rates to make sure that those subsidies don't exist. There's not a lot of solar panels out there right now, but I think there'll be more and more in the future. We're also looking at efficient electrification. It's kind of a new word that the Electric Power Research Institute is coined. There's a lot of things we can do that will increase electric sales and at the same time be good for the environment. Electric vehicles is one of those things. I think in the past we've looked at those a little skeptically in the north, thinking that may not work very good in these cold climates, but that's not really true anymore. I think that some of the new electric cars like the Teslas and others are going to be coming, and in the next 5 to 10 years you're going to see a lot of those electric vehicles. And the thing about those vehicles is that us wanting to increase the electric sales is something that most of the environmental community supports, because they see that the electric utilities such as ourselves are building renewable resources like we are with our hydro facilities, and those are the growth facilities that are going to be used to produce the electricity that are going to be used by the electric vehicles. So most of the environmentalists are very supportive of that form of efficient electrification on growth. We've got heat pumps. We think that things like that we'll be working with you as well. And the last one that I'll mention on our strategic plans that we're working on is keeping up with new technologies. We're doing one major action that we're doing there is we're working with our members on Smart Grid. Currently, we offer in Sioux Falls the ability to read our members' retail meters. And we've got about eight or nine of our members that we're currently doing that for. It's AMI, automated metering infrastructure. Electronic meters are in the houses just like the old electromechanical ones are. The largest cities that we have that we're doing it for are the city of Pierre and the city of Valley City, North Dakota. They have got electric and water meters that are read by us in Sioux Falls. We could do it every 5 seconds if we wanted to. We read those meters, and once a month we send that information back to them so they can do the billing. They still control the billing. We don't get the addresses, so there's no security issues there. That was something we wanted to make sure that we didn't open ourselves up for. But the city of Moorhead, you could probably do that yourself if you wanted to do it. And some of our larger members are doing that themselves. But most of our members, you know, if they're 5,000 people, 6,000 people, they don't have the technical staff to be able to do the AMI. They're looking to us to help them out do that, to develop a system, put it together so that they can have AMI in their city.
You know, the term smart grid has been thrown around for a long time, particularly in Europe, where smart grid has been functional for many, many years. And, you know, we've talked about that before in terms of doing other things with smart technology, including controlling and so forth, which we do on a remote basis anyway, as I was checking into my own home today. But, I mean, where are we along in that process? I mean, we talked about that years ago in terms of what we should do with smart grid technology. And how far along are we? I know we've got our automated meter reading has really come a long way since we started that process. But where are we with the rest of the technology?
You want to talk about this one?
Hate to wake you, Travis. Is this?
Yeah, he was going to talk about this anyway.
Yeah, actually, this is what I was going to be speaking about tonight.
So
and-
this is sort of like a segue over to you, kind of?
Yeah, it could be if you want to, or we can go back to Tom.
No, we're going to push Tom around. So.
I'm pretty well.
So, you know, part of what we're discussing is, you know, we've been working on GIS for about 7 years now to get that system up and operational. And part of tonight's discussion was talking about CMMS, which is Computerized Maintenance Management Systems. We're going to talk about OMS, or Outage Management Systems. We're also going to be speaking about AMI as well, too, and where we're going to be looking to go here in the next few years with those different items. CMMS is kind of to, you know, digitize or put everything on the computers what we do now on paper, and that would help with work orders, service orders, being able to track materials electronically, and being able to just kind of automate more of our staff needs and things like that, or line crews or water crews, whatever you want to say there. Also, we'd be looking at, probably in the next 3 years of our strategic plan, we'd be looking at getting deeper into AMI. Right now, we're a AMR system, and what's it going to take to get us into an AMI system? There's several options on what we can do. We can do a complete rip and replace where we pull every meter out, electric and water, which is very costly. And then there's other options where we can overlay a new system on our existing system, or continue to utilize the existing infrastructure we got, and then be able to read a lot of that information remotely, kind of like what Tom was talking about as well too. And we can do that on a faster pace than once a month, which is normally what we get. So those are things that we're working on. As for AMR, we're probably 85, 90% AMR reads, maybe closer.
Maybe closer to 95%, so not as effective in our commercial meters, so then those that have a power and demand factor, but residential, I'd say we're probably at about 99%.
Okay, we've come a long way.
Yes.
Yep.
We really have.
And it's taken a long time to get there, and there's a lot of costs that have been incorporated into that. So, you know, a lot of those meters are still working just fine. And, you know, do we continue to use those meters, or do we replace everything? Another side of that too is we'd want to talk about our load management system as well too. A lot of new technologies that are out there. Right now we're a one-way communication system, so we just send out and it runs. There's now things out there where we can get two-way communication, so we know how much load we're dropping when we get into a load management situation. So another thing we look at, a lot of the AMI systems or AMI companies actually have that function included into their system. So when we would do an AMI conversion or overlay, whatever it is, then we would look at doing a load management conversion as well.
Tom, I didn't want my question to interrupt your presentation. And
I think it was a great segue, sorry.
yeah. unbeknownst to me at the time. Anybody have any questions or comments for Tom while we've got him here? Go ahead.
I think just a reminder that we have people here, and if people are our viewers and our customers, when you were referring to AMI, AMR, pretty much clueless of what you're referring to. So I just caution you to maybe just work away from that. So
You haven't worked with engineers a long time, have you?
I can appreciate that, but that was one of the things that I asked for when we first started, about a list of all what the abbreviations and acronyms and all that sort of thing are. So I'm still trying to learn from that, so.
It'd be about the size of a Webster's dictionary. But,
So,
Yeah, I mean, if you want an explanation on AMR and AMI, AMR, right now, the way Moorhead Public Service does it, it's automated meter reading. What we do now is we have two meter readers, which drive around in vehicles. They've got a handheld that they set into their vehicle, and they basically drive around, and it picks up all the readings on the routes that they've got.
that cover both water and electric?
It does cover both water and electric, and that's one of the big things we got to figure out with AMI, because a lot of municipal utilities just do electric, some just do water. We do both, so we got to look at that on a twofold scale. So AMI, or Automated Meter Infrastructure System, is where you have a network, whether it's a cellular network or a mesh network or whatever it is, that you use to bring all that meter information back into a backhaul system, back to a server, whether it's located internally or off in the cloud somewhere. So those are a couple of the other things that we do with AMI and AMR.
Probably don't want to talk about it on television, but I'm curious about the security and the ability to hack. If it has that kind of signal strength from the side or back of a house to the street, it must be readable at some surreptitious level as well. Would you care to talk about security a little bit, or shall we save that for another time?
I think it'd be good to talk about that at a different time.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the systems are built, they're very,
Machine language.
yeah, machine language. I mean, if you pull it, I mean, you'd have to be an engineer to
Yeah.
read it, or a software engineer to figure out what it is.
I think maybe it's a.
But there, I mean, it is secured, it's, it's hard to figure it out, but.
And my question is probably more about a reassurance that it is secure, as opposed to, customers who are using too much water, or they think they are, or we think they are.
Or not enough, depending
Or
on
not enough,
our
or, yeah,
cash flow
right.
is.
Right.
I would suspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, our legal counsel is in the back here, but I do believe that we can go into closed session to talk about security-related issues. And so at some point in the future, you may want to have one of those closed sessions and to discuss it. We have talked about those topics before. It's been a while. We pretty much trust our staff to keep on top of it. Hopefully, that was well-placed trust, but
It is one of our strategic plans,
Good.
items to discuss, so we can close for that.
those are always concerns, and I think, Tom, you must feel the same way.
Well, absolutely, and when we read meters under the AMI system of our member communities, we make sure that we do not get any customer information. So if the information's hacked, they aren't going to get any customer information at all, because that stays locally in your business computer. It's very important.
Well, and of course, Minnesota, because of the data privacy limitations, is very, very strict, much more so than our surrounding states with regard to that. So we would not want to not be in compliance.
Mr. Chairman, I did have one other thing, and that is a little review of the current project that we're working on right now, a hydroelectric project that we're building in Pella, Iowa, on the Des Moines River. It's an existing U.S. Corps of Engineers dam, a dam that was built in 1969, and produces Lake Red Rock. The water in the spring the levels rise all the way back up to the city of Des Moines, about 60 miles, and then slowly over the summer the water is released. So, and hydrogeneration was never put on that project. It was never built there. Back in the 60s, power was so cheap. Nuclear power was coming about, and they said it was too cheap to meter. that just wasn't installed. And it was not part of the original Pick Sloan marketing area, which Missouri River dams were built and you get cheap hydropower on now. Oh, there's a lot of recreation there. Flood control. Flood control, as a lot of these dams were built because of flood control. There was some massive flooding.
Which river are you saying that was?
It's on the Des Moines River. It goes through the city of Des Moines, then through the city of Pella, and it's Lake Red Rock. We're under construction right now of a facility that's going to be about 55 megawatts peak. And what is the peak in Moorhead right now? About 80. So, you know, if that facility couldn't quite by itself meet your needs, on a capacity basis, it's got about a 60% capacity factor, which means there's a lot of water there. And the good thing about this is a renewable energy resource. It's water and it's energy during the summer. You don't have to worry about whether or not when the peak is on in the summertime it's going to be generating, because that's when the water is going to be going through the turbines. The capacity factors in the winter months are not as high because the Corps of Engineers lets the water come up in the spring, and then over the summer they slowly let the water out until the fall.
You have a better relationship with that Corps of Engineers than we have with Lake Traverse?
Actually, we have a very good relationship with this Corps of Engineers.
Just thought I'd ask.
Not to say we haven't had our trials and tribulations, but a good relationship. But I do have some pictures of the construction at the Red Rock Hydro site on where we are right now. When the facility is completed in 2 years, it will have taken 14 years from the time we started permitting to the end of construction. And there was no opposition. Here's some picture here right now of the dam itself, and that is where the water will be coming out of the turbine generators. Next picture you can move to. Pardon? Oh yeah. This is the video. Okay. Is this the video?
Oh, so hold on.
One of them is the video, and one is. Yeah, go to the video. If you can run the video, that'd be great. Is this the?
Casey can do anything.
There are some pictures, and then there's a video that was taken by a drone that flies over the site, and you can. That's the existing dam structure. We're going to be poking two 30-foot holes in the dam structure. That'll be probably next summer.
Casey just blew up the dam.
Video is having. Why don't you just
There's $100 million down the tubes.
You might want to. You might want to just go to the.
By having Casey come down and do it for you. There you go.
You might want to go just to the pictures. Go to the board presentation and just do the pictures. Yeah, those are pictures, and we can just slowly go forward with that then. But this project is $350 million. It's the biggest project we've undertaken, and we got a AA bond rating. Our financing entity, Western Minnesota Municipal Power Agency, we were able to get bonds sold at about 4% interest. Last time we've got about that with some of the transmission that we will also be owning the CapEx 2020 lines that we're part owners of. We've got about $100 million left to finance that will do that probably about a year from now.
So those bonds are issued then through the Missouri River?
Actually, they're under the name of Western Minnesota Municipal Power Agency. One of the things about Missouri River when it was formed, it never got bonding authority. It's a joint powers agreement between cities and 4 states. And we needed federal authority because we were a multi-state joint powers agreement to be able to issue debt. We were never did that. What we did is we took a Minnesota affiliate, which is all of our Minnesota members. They sell the debt. They sell the power to Missouri River. Missouri River sells it to our members. And Bill is chairman of the board of Western Minnesota. If you look up the debt, that's where the debt is through. It was Western Minnesota Municipal Power Agency. Here's a picture of you can just barely see the 2 turbines where the turbines will sit. And the powerhouse will sit right on top of that. Go to the next picture. There they are. There's 2 turbines. They're nominally rated 18.4 megawatts, 36 megawatts total. Total production can be up to 55 megawatts if the height of the water is higher. And you can see where all that rebar there, we're pouring concrete, and the water is going to be coming in on the right side of both of those holes. The holes is where the turbines will sit, and the generators will spin. The water is going to come where you see the rebar. The water is going to come around and go. It's like a snail shell, and that is 100,000 cubic yards of concrete is being put in this construction site. Next slide. And you can see this is looking upstream now. That's where the penstock is going to go right straight through you can see the dam back there. I'm going to punch a hole through the dam. And the water's going to come around and the turbines are going to sit in that hole, the turbine generators. Next slide. There's another picture of where the turbine generators will sit. Next slide. Kind of an overhead picture now of the water coming in you can see on the big part of the tubes, there'll be 2 penstocks. They'll be coming and going around, spinning out, and then it'll go out back that way as it goes down. It comes around, goes down through the turbines, and then it goes out to the river. Next slide.
Will Missouri River be operating that facility?
Corps of Engineers operates it, but we'll have people down there that'll run the project. But like the facilities on the Missouri River, the Corps tells us when the water's what it's going to be and how much is going to be released, because they're concerned about this water from the Des Moines River getting into the Mississippi. If the Mississippi's flooding, they got to pull back, and it's done under their master operating manual on the Mississippi River, like you've got the one on the Missouri. Here you can see a picture of the 2 turbines, and the 2 penstocks will be going towards the dam, and the water will be coming out. And those are temporary coffer dams, those big dark things in the left center of the picture. Those are just filled with sand, and when the project is done, those will be removed. Next slide. It's a bypass valve. When the generator, something happens and they can't run, you've got all that water. It's got to be allowed to come out through the generator somehow. So next slide. Just some backfilling. Next slide. That's the penstock. That's where the water is going to be coming from the dam. We poke the hole into the turbine generators. Next slide. And just a lot of this concrete we had to build were just retaining walls so that we could build a structure, and then you break it, it's busted out. But it's the only way with a facility of this size you can get the facility built. Next slide again. I think this is pretty close. This is just a picture looking at the penstock through. They're going to be concrete with steel in the inside of that. We'll fill up this hole where the water is going to be coming to the turbine generators. Next slide. That's the intake structure. That goes down quite a few feet. That right now has got you can see those big tubes that were long, where they were drilled and they were filled with concrete. And then we had this huge backhoe that went down to pull the dirt out, and now we'll start filling in the intake structure. Next slide. That's the excavation down at the bottom. I think that's probably the last slide. And maybe that's the last slide. That is. But just a picture, and in the next, when we get close to getting this project done, we'll be inviting a lot of our members to come down, take a look at the site, and we'll have a groundbreaking ceremony. But when is it? It'll most likely be spring of 19. We're going to wait for nice weather, yeah. But as I said, a project like this, it's frustrating because no one opposed this project. Even the Corps of Engineers worked with us, but from the time permitting started to when this project will be done will be 14 years. You can almost build a nuclear power plant in that time. And one of the things that we're trying to get our congressional delegations in all of our states to support, and they do if we can ever get an energy bill passed, is to condense that permitting. It took us more than 75 permits that we had to get from the Corps of Engineers, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, from the Department of Natural Resources in the state of Iowa, Fish and Wildlife Service. During this process, we had the Iowa Department of Natural Resources was concerned that we were going to kill too many fish because of the turbines, the fish going through the turbines. Well, a lot of the fish get stunned anyway when they have the gates open of the dam, because they go through some kind of baffles so that it slows the water down. And a whole bunch of eagles are down there in the spring, and they eat the fish that are kind of floating there, stunned. So Fish and Wildlife said, well, we're concerned you're not going to kill enough fish, because we like the eagles. But we got through that, and we'll persevere. But Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if I didn't get a chance to say thank you for the years of service that I was able to provide and work with you. Back in 1976, I started working at Moorhead Public Service, and this is where my career started. I have a lot of fond memories of people.
So you're responsible for all of this?
No. The team is responsible for all of this. I worked with some very, very talented and good people over the years. And in 1985, at the young age of 32, this utility board at that time gave me a chance to be the general manager of this utility. And I've learned a lot. And I'll tell you, it helped prepare me to do my job so well, because Bill and the other cities who come to Missouri River, I understand the pressures that they get working with the citizens, working with their utility boards, the city councils, and it was a great experience that I have. And after 1985, I was here for until 1992 as the general manager. A couple of those years with you, Ken, and I appreciate and am so happy I had a chance to work with you. And we meant this with all of our heart last year when we came here and Missouri River was able to provide you the Community Leader Award, Ken, because you are truly a community leader.
Thank you, Tom. Enough of that. Really enough of that. I was going to ask one question, Tom. And the whole cyclical nature of what happens in Washington, which you are painfully aware of, and what happens in the electric industry. When you were here, we talked about the sale of the power marketing agencies and how it was going to be privatized and all sorts of things. With the current climate in D.C., or lack of climate in D.C., or lack of leadership in D.C., where do we see that heading? Are we still looking at those same kinds of issues? Are they coming back? Because they've come back and floated to the top a few times and got pushed back down. I mean, what are you reading in the tea leaves?
Well, Mr. Chairman, you are correct. About every 10 years, this issue resurfaces. I think the federal government sees what a gem they have in the Western Area Power Administration, the hydro facilities, just as the city of Moorhead and other cities know what a gem they have. And they look at that and say, well, let's let private business do it. Let's sell it and get the money and use it for something else. And they've looked at that. They've looked at raising rates to market levels. However, market levels right now aren't much different on the organized markets than the federal hydropower. I think that this is going to come back every few years because it has not so much to do with the political climate that changes. It has a lot to do with the people at the Office of Management and Budget. A lot of those long-term employees know that, you know, if we keep pushing, one of these times maybe it'll happen. Maybe we'll be able to sell that, get it off our books. But the strength that we have is the ability of us to work with the rural electric co-ops through organizations like Midwest Electric Consumers, which I know Bill sits on the board of, where we're one of the priorities is to educate our senators, our congressmen of the value of the federal hydropower and how much it means to our member communities in our rural areas. I think if we continue to keep that partnership alive and continue to educate our members of Congress, we're going to be able to stop that. And in fact, from what I understand, that proposal that's out there right now, which is in the President's budget proposal again, is dead.
It was interesting, though, at Washington Rally this year, that gone from year to year. A lot of worry, a lot of worries. Of course, we were 3 weeks into the administration at that point, and that really like it was. But it was interesting, the dynamic of that issue 12 months before.
Your microphone isn't on.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm done.
But now you're 7 months into it and you still don't know what's going on. So anyway, there's my political comment for the evening. One of the things we should do tonight, and thank you for your kind comments, my friend, is we should elect a chairman for the next meeting. I shouldn't, but otherwise we wouldn't be able.
The bylaws do provide for the secretary to.
Our secretary is Ralph.
So that'll be-
Okay, so that's covered.
In case you're wondering.
So at least these two can call a meeting. in a couple weeks, okay? Then I'll pass on that.
Well, no, let's continue discussing that. With Ralph, as far as has had a number of conflicts, I think we've talked about this a few times here, and with Ken passing the baton, I think the consensus was that we would nominate Dave as the future president. Is that something that we can do at this time, or what would be the proper protocol?
The bylaws have that at your first regular meeting following appointments of commissioners by the council, and you'll elect officers from its members, the president who will preside over the meetings, and the secretary who shall preside in the absence of the president. At a regular meeting as soon as practicable, following the time in which a vacancy occurs in either of these offices, the commission shall elect one of its own members to such vacancy. Such officers shall hold office until their successors are chosen and qualify in their stead. So that would be in the event of a vacancy in one of those positions.
So effectively, we should schedule it for the next meeting.
Yes, yes.
That makes sense. Cheryl will be on board, and she's entitled to a vote in that process, as opposed to a vote from the
I wish I was.
I bet she was on board right now.
They can't both represent the same ward at the same time.
She's our guest right now.
Yeah.
Leave.
I thought it was, I was a little concerned that your passing the baton was going to turn to passing away.
All the nice talk is stopped.
I knew it would. There was. So we're going to go into closed session in a few moments. The meeting will all go into closed session as permitted by Minnesota statute, section 13D05, subdivision 3C, to discuss the acquisition of XL Energy service territory located in Oakport Township, the area that was next into the city of Moorhead. I don't believe we're going to discuss the bill's review until Ralph is back. And so we're going to go in. I'm going to assume that we can take action on this matter.
Right.
So we will come back out and take action at the conclusion of the executive session. We have a motion to go into executive session.
I'd so move.
Is there a second, Mr. Regala?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Go into closed session.
You can do that, yeah.
You ready? We're now back in open session. Casey, would you read the motion?
Yes, the commission approved a motion to approve the compensation and orderly transfer agreement between Northern States Power Company, doing business as Xcel Energy, and the Moorhead Public Service Commission, which has been revised since commission approval on May 23, 2017, for Xcel Energy's electric service territory located in the recently annexed area of Oakport Township.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are now signing off.